Can we truly know God? Now the question here is not whether there is God, but the question is whether can we know God? Now this question has haunted me throughout my life. From me asking about the nature of reality, about purpose, about God to my parents when I was young, to me publishing my first book on decoding God a few years ago. For decades, this has been a very important quest in my life. Today we will go deep into the wisdom of Upanishad and we will try to understand whether God is truly knowable. So by the end of the video, we will come to an understanding. If God is knowable, how can we know God? And if we cannot understand God, why can we not understand God? And what is the right approach to pursuing the nature of reality and God? If you are a philosopher or a student or a scientist or a follower of a particular religion or even an atheist, these questions and these answers might bring you a lot of clarity. First of all, let's begin with the fundamental mistake in our current approach. Most of us approach God like this. We treat God like a distant star and we are trying to somehow see that God and decode that God through a telescope. We are basically objectifying God and trying to understand this object in great detail, and we wish to know this object. Now Vedanta says there is a fundamental problem here. First of all, as per Vedanta and as per any religion across the world, God is infinite. God is not bound by anything. God is not bound by any form, any shape, any parameters of time or space or causality, which means God is beyond the scope of time, space and causation. This basic description of God itself clearly tells us that our current approach of searching for God is wrong. Our current way of seeking God is wrong. Something which is infinite can never be caught by something that is finite. Our sense organs, no matter how sophisticated they are very limited. When we look at light, we do not look at light in all of its dimensions and we cannot look at all wavelengths. We only look at certain aspect of light. The way a dog perceives this world in terms of vision is very different. The way an owl perceives this world in terms of its vision is very different compared to human beings. And similarly, when it comes to sound, what we hear is a very small aspect of what is actually out there. A dog can hear much more than what human beings can hear. So the reality itself is infinite, but based on the limited capabilities of our sense organs, we are perceiving one aspect of that reality and we are experiencing that as our personal reality. When this is the case, how can God, which is an infinite being, be perceived from the limited parameters and the limited instruments of the sense organs? So, objectifying God and trying to find God as an object is a fundamental mistake that we do as seekers and even as scientists. That is why when different religious teachers, when different theists sit against atheists, in most of the cases, they will not be able to logically win an argument with an atheist. Because how can God, which is beyond the parameters of time and space and which is infinite in its nature, be comprehended by the limited instruments of sense organs and by the limited parameters of human logic? But just because we cannot comprehend something through our sense organs, it does not mean that it is not there. In fact, God is very real, more real than we ourselves. And not only that, God is more close to us than we can ever imagine. God is here and now. But if this is the case, how can we approach God? How can we understand this? Let us explore this deeper. Now, before we go ahead, check out this free training on conscious creation. Conscious creation is a framework that is based on the ancient Vedanta, which can take you to your ideal life in a matter of years instead of decades. The Kenopanishad presents a radical challenge to this entire framework and approach. It suggests that our fundamental assumption about the nature of seeking might be completely wrong. So it states any normal method of perception is irrelevant and it does not work when it comes to understanding and knowing God. The Upanishad states that which cannot be seen but through which we can see, that is Brahman. That which cannot be heard but through which hearing happens, that is Brahman. That which cannot be understood by the mind but through which mind itself is enabled and mind itself functions, that is Brahman or God. This implies that what we are seeking is actually within, or at least even if it is outside of us, the outside approach will never work when it comes to God, because the instruments that we have of the sense organs, of the mind itself, and the parameters of logic itself is very, very limited when it comes to comprehending God. So, understanding God may not be possible, but knowing God is definitely possible as per the Upanishads. Here is the crucial insight. We can only understand objects because they are separate from us. An apple exists independently, so we can examine it from different angles, study its properties and comprehend its nature. But what if God is not an object at all? What if it is the very method we use to seek that prevents us from finding what we are looking for? Now with this, let's come to an ancient verse in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where the Upanishad says that the sense organs are cursed and they will never be able to find God. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad states our Jnanendriyas are cursed, meaning they cannot grasp the infinite fullness or Brahman. This is not poetic language or metaphorical thinking. The text is speaking about the fundamental flaw in the nature of human perception. This curse refers to the limitations of sense organs. Science has already proven that our sense organs are very, very limited, and we are not seeing everything that is in front of us. We are only seeing that which we are capable of seeing. We are only hearing things that which we are capable of hearing. So, when we cannot even see what is in front of us properly, and if we cannot even hear what is actually right next to us properly, then how are we supposed to comprehend God, which is infinite by its nature? Let's take an example here. Our senses catch only visible light, a tiny slice of the electromagnetic spectrum spanning roughly from 380 to 740 nanometers. Ultraviolet rays stream around us constantly, carrying information we cannot access. Radio waves, microwaves, X-rays and gamma rays fill the space around us, but we move through this reality without detecting any of it. So this is what the Upanishads understood thousands of years ago. Although science is a very, very capable field of study, and it has done incredible things for us, and it has taken humanity to great heights in terms of technology, in terms of transportation, in terms of healthcare. When it comes to understanding the nature of consciousness and the nature of God, science has not even taken its first step. This we can understand by understanding what the Upanishads are telling us. With this, let's come to the last part, which is a revolutionary shift where we begin to look at God as the subject and not as the object. Now, if we go deeper into the study of Vedanta, we come to an understanding that God is neither the object nor the subject. It is the infinite being, and every aspect of this universe is pervaded by God, and every aspect of creation is God. But the problem here is that God cannot be understood as the object because of the inherent limitations of the sense organs and the inherent limitations of mind itself, which we discussed in the previous part. So if God cannot be understood as the object, then God can only be understood as the subject itself. Now here let's deep dive into the nature of God as explained by the Upanishads, and let's understand how we can approach seeking God and knowing God. What if God is not something to be found out there, but is actually the very consciousness through which you are watching this video right now? The Kenopanishad presents a revolutionary teaching that completely transforms how we understand the divine. Instead of treating God as the object to be discovered, The text reveals that God is the subject, the consciousness itself that enables all experience. So, it is a total shift in paradigm. Now, take a look at your own experience. This video that you're watching is a happening in your consciousness. Morning you woke up and you brushed your teeth and you had your breakfast and you went to work. Whatever you did within your awareness, within your consciousness. In fact, everything that you have ever done, including the seeking of God, the understanding of God, and if you are an atheist, even your refutation of God, everything has happened within your consciousness. Your body itself is a happening within your consciousness. Your mind itself is a happening within your consciousness. And since everything is a happening within your consciousness, this consciousness is the fundamental essence of reality. Consciousness is the medium through which you are interacting with the world. In fact, the world itself is nothing but an appearance in your consciousness. And in fact, you are nothing but this consciousness itself. And like this, everything in its essence is this consciousness, and this consciousness is Brahman as per the Upanishads. So God is not something seen, heard or thought about. God is the seeing, the hearing, the thinking. God is the awareness that makes all perception possible. When you look at this screen, God is not the image you see, but the consciousness which enables the sight. When you hear my words, God is not the sound, but the awareness through which your hearing happens. This recognition leads to something very extraordinary. That is, we experiencing immortality in this life. This ultimate state of knowing God is described with different names and different labels in different cultures. Buddhism calls this nirvana. Vedanta calls it moksha. The Western societies call this enlightenment. But what they are pointing towards is one and the same. When you understand God in fullness, when you understand the nature of consciousness itself, and when you truly know consciousness for what it is, and know yourself for who you are, as that consciousness, beyond the body and mind, you become immortal, says the Upanishads. Now, how do you become immortal? The Upanishads tell us that technically you do not become anything, you simply recognize who you are. When you are identified with the body, you are a mortal because the body has a particular deadline after which the body ceases to exist. The body will be burnt or buried. But when we recognize that we were never the body, but instead we were that infinite consciousness which was beyond the body, which was beyond time, space, causality, and beyond all objects, we come to this place of knowing of God and of ourselves as one. This is the place of Aham Brahmasmi, where we experience everything as one and where we experience ourselves as God or that infinite consciousness. Now, the understanding of God is very different in Sanatana Dharma, in the Upanishads. God was never meant to be understood as per Upanishads. God was simply meant to be realized as our own essence. So finally, to answer the question of whether we can understand God, the Upanishads clearly tell us that God can never be understood because understanding happens in the mind. Understanding is a process within the mind, and God cannot be confined to the parameters of the mind, to the limitations of the mind, to the boundaries of the mind, and hence God can never be understood. But God can definitely be known, God can definitely be realized, and we can do that by going beyond the mind and recognizing the nature of consciousness for what it is and recognizing our own true self for what it is.